Iceland, a small island nation in the North Atlantic, was once considered a model of economic prosperity. The country had a high standard of living, low unemployment, and a stable financial system. However, this all changed in 2008 when Iceland experienced a catastrophic financial crisis. The crisis was triggered by a combination of factors, including excessive risk-taking by banks, lax financial regulation, and a global credit crunch. Icelandic banks had borrowed heavily in foreign currencies, particularly Swiss francs and Japanese yen, to fund their rapid expansion. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, the value of the Icelandic krona plummeted, making it impossible for the banks to repay their debts. This led to the collapse of all three of Iceland's major banks, Kaupthing, Landsbanki, and Glitnir. The collapse of the banks had a devastating impact on the Icelandic economy. The value of the krona fell by more than 50%. Against the euro, inflation soared and unemployment rose to over 8%. The Icelandic government was forced to nationalize the banks and seek a bailout from the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The financial crisis had a profound impact on Icelandic society. Many people lost their jobs, homes, and savings. Trust in the government and financial institutions was shattered. The crisis also led to a period of political instability, with protests and riots erupting in the streets of Reykjavik. The Icelandic financial crisis was a traumatic event for the country, but it also served as a wake-up call. The crisis exposed the dangers of excessive risk-taking and the need for stronger financial regulation. In the years since the crisis, Iceland has implemented a number of reforms aimed at preventing a repeat of the 2008 meltdown. As Iceland grappled with the aftermath of its financial meltdown, a wave of public anger swept the nation, demanding accountability for the reckless actions that had brought the country to its knees. This anger was directed not just at the faceless institutions that had crumbled, but also at the individuals who had steered them toward disaster. The Icelandic legal system, thrust into the spotlight, embarked on an unprecedented series of prosecutions targeting high-ranking executives and financiers. These trials, closely watched by a public hungry for justice, sought to unravel the complex web of financial misconduct that had brought the nation's economy to its knees. Among the most prominent figures caught in the legal crosshairs were Sigurjón Arnarson, the former CEO of Landsbanki, and Hreiðar Már Sigurdsson, the former CEO of Kaupthing. These once revered captains of industry found themselves facing charges of market manipulation, fraud, and breach of trust. The courts, in their judgments, did not shy away from delivering hefty sentences, reflecting the gravity of the crimes and the depth of public sentiment. Arnarson was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison, while Sigurdsson received a 5-year sentence. These landmark rulings, the first of their kind in Iceland's history, sent shockwaves through the financial world, signaling that recklessness on such a scale would not go unpunished. Iceland's Supreme Court played a pivotal role in shaping the narrative of accountability that emerged from the financial crisis. As the highest court in the land, it became the final arbiter of justice, reviewing the judgments handed down by lower courts in the high-profile financial crime cases. The Supreme Court's rulings were not merely about individual guilt or innocence, they were about setting a precedent for the future of Icelandic finance. Would the court validate the lower court's tough stance on financial misconduct, sending a clear message of deterrence? In a series of closely watched decisions, the Supreme Court largely upheld the convictions and sentences of the key figures involved in the financial collapse. It affirmed the lower court's judgments against Arnarson and Sigurdsson, cementing their status as symbols of the recklessness that had brought Iceland to its knees. These rulings had far-reaching consequences. They reinforced the principle that no one, regardless of their status or wealth, was above the law. The Supreme Court's unwavering stance sent a powerful message to the financial sector. A culture of impunity would no longer be tolerated. The court judgments, though welcomed by many as a sign of accountability, did little to quell the simmering public anger that had been ignited by the financial crisis. For many Icelanders, the sentences handed down to the bankers, while significant, felt inadequate compared to the scale of the economic devastation they had wrought. The crisis had left deep scars on Icelandic society. People had lost their homes, their life savings, and their faith in the institutions that were supposed to protect them. The sight of once powerful bankers being led away in handcuffs, while symbolic, did little to alleviate the day-to-day struggles faced by ordinary citizens. Moreover, the crisis had exposed a deep-seated distrust in the political system. The close ties between the financial elite and the government fueled public cynicism, with many believing that the system was rigged in favor of the wealthy and powerful. The judgments, far from offering closure, became a lightning rod for public frustration. Protests continued, demanding further accountability and systemic change. The crisis had shaken the very foundations of Icelandic society, leaving behind a legacy of anger, distrust, and disillusionment. Section 5. Political upheaval, resignations, and reforms in the wake of crisis. The Icelandic financial crisis was not merely an economic catastrophe, it was a political earthquake that sent shockwaves through the country's power structures. As the true extent of the economic meltdown became apparent, public anger at the government's handling of the crisis reached boiling point. The government, led by Prime Minister Gerhard, faced accusations of incompetence, negligence, and a cozy relationship with the same financial elite that had brought the country to its knees. Protests, once a rarity on the streets of Reykjavik, became a regular occurrence, with citizens demanding the government's resignation. In the face of mounting pressure, the government buckled. Harder, facing a vote of no confidence, announced his resignation, becoming the first world leader to step down as a direct result of the 2008 financial crisis. His departure marked a turning point in Icelandic politics, signaling that the public would no longer tolerate business as usual. The political upheaval did not end with Hard's resignation. The crisis triggered snap elections, ushering in a new era of Icelandic politics. The centre-left Social Democratic Alliance, capitalizing on public discontent, swept to power, promising sweeping reforms to the financial system and a break from the old ways of doing business. Section 6. Scars of the crisis, long-term impacts and lessons for Iceland. The Icelandic financial crisis, though a decade in the rear-view mirror, continues to cast a long shadow over the nation. While Iceland has made remarkable strides in recovering from the economic abyss, the scars of the crisis run deep, serving as a stark reminder of the fragility of prosperity and the enduring consequences of unchecked greed. The crisis left an indelible mark on Iceland's economic landscape. The collapse of its banking sector, once a symbol of the country's economic prowess, led to a dramatic decline in living standards. The value of the Icelandic krona plummeted, inflation soared, and unemployment reached levels not seen in generations. While Iceland has since managed to stabilize its economy and return to growth, the crisis left behind a legacy of debt. The government's decision to shoulder the burden of the failed banks, while necessary to prevent a complete economic collapse, saddled the nation with a mountain of debt that will take years to pay down. Beyond the economic indicators, the crisis had a profound impact on the Icelandic psyche. It shattered the nation's sense of exceptionalism, exposing the vulnerabilities of a small, open economy heavily reliant on a single sector. The crisis also eroded public trust in institutions, leaving behind a legacy of skepticism towards the financial sector and the political elite. Section 7. The Global Ripple Effect, Iceland's Crisis as a Cautionary Tale. The Icelandic financial crisis, though geographically isolated, sent ripples of shock and unease throughout the global financial system. The collapse of Iceland's banks, once considered bastions of stability, served as a stark warning to the world. The interconnected nature of global finance meant that no nation, regardless of its size or perceived strength, was immune to contagion. The crisis exposed the dangers of excessive leverage and the systemic risks posed by financial institutions that had grown too big to fail. Iceland's banks, fueled by cheap credit and a thirst for expansion, had amassed debts many times larger than the country's GDP. When the global credit crunch hit in 2008, triggering a cascade of defaults and panic, Iceland's over-leveraged banks were left critically exposed. Their collapse, swift and brutal, sent shockwaves through the global financial system, highlighting the fragility of a system teetering on a mountain of debt. Iceland's experience served as a cautionary tale for other nations grappling with the fallout from the global financial crisis. It underscored the need for stronger financial regulation, greater transparency, and a re-evaluation of the risks associated with unfettered financial globalization. Section 8. Rebuilding a nation: Iceland's path to recovery and reform. In the aftermath of its financial meltdown, Iceland embarked on a remarkable journey of recovery and reform. Faced with economic devastation and a shattered financial system, the Icelandic people demonstrated resilience, ingenuity, and a commitment to building a more sustainable future. The government, under new leadership, implemented a series of bold and unorthodox policies aimed at stabilizing the economy and restoring public trust. These measures included capital controls to stem the outflow of currency, debt relief for homeowners facing foreclosure, and investment in social safety nets to cushion the blow for those most affected by the crisis. Recognizing the need for a fundamental overhaul of its financial system, Iceland implemented stricter regulations and oversight mechanisms. The government broke up its failed banks, nationalizing their domestic operations while allowing their foreign subsidiaries to fail. This approach, while controversial, helped to shield the domestic economy from further contagion. Iceland's recovery was also aided by its natural resources, particularly its abundant geothermal energy and thriving fishing industry. These sectors provided much-needed jobs and export earnings, helping to stabilize the economy and reduce its reliance on the financial sector. Section 9. The importance of financial literacy and regulation. The Icelandic financial crisis underscored the crucial importance of financial literacy and effective regulation in preventing future crises. The crisis exposed a lack of understanding among the general public about the complexities of financial products and the risks associated with excessive borrowing. Many Icelanders, enticed by low interest rates and readily available credit, had taken on large mortgages and consumer loans denominated in foreign currencies. When the krona collapsed, these loans became unsustainable, leading to widespread defaults and financial hardship. The crisis highlighted the need for greater financial education to empower individuals to make informed financial decisions. It also exposed the shortcomings of Iceland's regulatory framework, which had been ill-equipped to handle the rapid expansion and risky lending practices of its banking sector. In response to the crisis, Iceland strengthened its financial regulations, increased oversight of the banking sector, and implemented measures to promote financial literacy among its citizens. These reforms aim to create a more resilient financial system and empower individuals to navigate the complexities of modern finance. Section 10. Lessons learned preventing future crises. The Icelandic financial crisis, though a painful chapter in the nation's history, offered valuable lessons for the global community on the importance of preventing future financial meltdowns. The crisis highlighted the need for a fundamental shift in the way we approach finance, moving away from a culture of excessive risk-taking and toward a more sustainable and equitable model. One of the key lessons learned from Iceland's experience is the importance of effective regulation. The crisis exposed the dangers of lax oversight and the need for robust regulatory frameworks that can adapt to the ever-evolving complexities of the financial system. Another crucial lesson is the need for greater transparency and accountability in the financial sector. The opacity of many financial products and the lack of transparency surrounding the true risks involved contributed to the crisis. Iceland's experience also highlighted the importance of diversification. The country's heavy reliance on the financial sector magnified the impact of the crisis. A more diversified economy with a broader range of industries is more resilient to shocks. Section 11 conclusion: Iceland's legacy of resilience and reform. The Icelandic financial crisis stands as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and the importance of sound financial management. The crisis tested the very fabric of Icelandic society, pushing it to the brink of economic collapse and social unrest. Yet, from the ashes of this crisis emerged a story of resilience, reform, and a renewed commitment to building a more sustainable future. The Icelandic people, faced with adversity, chose not to succumb to despair, but to confront their challenges head-on. The crisis forced Iceland to confront uncomfortable truths about its economic model, its regulatory framework, and its own vulnerabilities. It led to a profound shift in the country's political landscape, ushering in a new era of transparency, accountability, and a greater focus on social welfare. Iceland's legacy is not merely one of crisis and recovery, but of the enduring power of human resilience, the importance of learning from past mistakes, and the unwavering belief in a brighter future. The country's experience offers valuable lessons for the global community on the importance of responsible finance, effective regulation, and the need to build more resilient and equitable societies.